Okay. Welcome to our workshop on Nikkei identity, culture, and community. My name is Jane Yamashiro, and I'll be your facilitator today. I have a few things planned for you. So between now and 3 o'clock, this is my plan. I would like to start by telling you about sort of my ideas for the workshop. Then have us go around the room and have each person introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself at the end and tell you a little bit about my research and sort of my interests in Nikkei identity and culture and community. Then we'll have some discussions about what it means to be Nikkei, and then I'll give you a quick bathroom break. We'll do a brainstorming exercise just to try to think about what's going on and different ways to do things. We'll talk about the future, and then end with final thoughts. So at the end, we'll again go around, and each person will have a chance to share what they thought about what we had done today. So, what I'd like to start with is self-introductions around the room. And these are some suggestions. If you'd like to start with your name, and your city, your country, prefer gender pronouns. If you would refer to yourself as, or have people refer to you as she or her, or he or him, or they or their. There's different pronouns that people will use, and sometimes it's not intuitive. Like, it's not something that you might guess, but it's important for us to know how we want to be seen. So then, if you could tell us something that you'd like others to know about you, and this could be anything. It could be your involvement with COPANI. It could be something about how you see yourself. It could be something about your involvement with your local community. It could be your hobbies, just whatever you'd like to say. And then something specifically that others wouldn't know by looking at you. So tell us something that maybe could surprise us, or just that you want to share something different. But it's open to how you want to manage it. These are suggestions. Does anyone have any questions about that?
How are you allowing, because it's a big group and if everyone took all the time, it's so that you take up the whole time.
I'd like each person to take maybe 30 seconds to a minute, so like a couple sentences. So, for example, I would say, hi, my name's Jane Yamashiro. I'm from Berkeley, California, in the United States. I use the gender pronouns she and her. Something I'd like others to know about me. I do research on Japanese American identity, Japanese society, and now Okinawan identity. And by looking at me, you might not know that I avoid glutens and I enjoy gluten-free baking. Something simple like that. So if we could go around the room, do you mind if I start here? Okay. So if you could speak so that everyone can hear.
Hello!
Time's up.
So my name is Malia Howard, and I am from Waihua, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. And I go by she, her, and something I'd like you guys to know about me. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I work at a community health center there. And then something you might not know by just looking at me. También hablo español. Mi nombre es Malia Howard y soy una enfermera practicante de la isla de Hawaii. Y estoy muy feliz de estar aquí con ustedes. I'm very happy to be here with y'all.
Hello, my kako. My name is Brandon Hayashi. I'm also from the island of Oahu in Hawaii. I do prefer to be called he and him. And as far as something to explain, I work in the clean energy sector, and to me, culture and the confluence between culture and climate, the crisis, and how we solve that is something very important. And something you may not know by looking at me is between Malia and myself, we have 4 boys, and each of them is just about 3.5 years in age. So 14, 10, 7, and 3. Yeah, somewhat of a crazy life, but it's good fun.
Well, my name is Luis Casuga. I'm from Mexico. Prefer them to pronounce he, him. Something that you like others to know about me is that I like to cooperate. I work in the wellness industry for many years now, and well, I like to be in this area of wellness and community. Then something that others can tell by looking at me is like I like animals a lot. In the animals, I like the reptiles, and the reptiles, the snakes.
Wow. That's cool.
I'm Amy Kiuchi. I'm from New Mexico. I like to be called she and her. This is my second COPANI. The first one I went to was 18 years ago in Santiago, Chile.
Wow.
And I have 3 boys, aged 16, 13, and 10.
My name is Jack Gamble, and I'm from Vancouver. I have worked in various businesses with my husband, and I enjoy working, and I don't know what else to say.
My name is Paul Sakuma, and you can address me as Paul Sakuma-san. So, Sakuma-san. I guess, anyway, I'm a Sansei, and I live here in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, just south of San Francisco. And as you can tell with my, I brought this because I want you to all to see that my roots are from Fukushima. 6 years ago, no one ever heard of Fukushima, but now everybody knows what Fukushima is. And I'm with a club, that's Fukushima Club, and I'm also very deeply rooted in Japanese culture. I belong to a Japanese Buddhist church and a Christian Japanese church, so I cover all my bases. I'm also part Muslim. I'm also a photographer. I live here in San Francisco, and so anyway, thank you.
I'm from Argentine. My name is Horacio Kagami from Argentine. The second generation, the Japanese. I have been several countries, several COPANI last year, but for 5th time in America now. Thank you very much.
All right.
No, I was translating and I got lost. I'm Francia.
Oh no, can you translate what he said?
Oh, yeah.
I don't castellano.
No. They know him.
They know him. They know him.
He's
Anyways, from Francia, hablamos Yonekura. Soy segunda generación. Bueno, yo no sé cómo es, segunda o tercera. Mi mamá es japonesa. Oh, my mother is Japanese. My dad is Colombian. So I don't know if I'm second or third generation. I don't know. I got lost. 30 years ago, I moved to the States 30 years ago. I lived in Florida. I'm a Spanish teacher. I never wanted to learn. I wanted to learn Japanese, but when I was going to elementary school, the kids used to make fun of me in Colombia because I speak, it's funny the way it sounds. So then I didn't want to, but now I want to. My first time in COPANI, and I like to dance. Belly dance.
Let's see it.
Hola, mi nombre es Carolina, soy de Buenos Aires, Argentina. Es la primera vez que participo de una COPANI y trabajo en el Jardín Japonés de Buenos Aires.
Carolina from Buenos Aires is first COPANI, and she was in the Japanese gardens in Argentina. So everybody likes it.
Disculpen, yo hablo en castellano, en español. Yo soy Felisa Zacata, de segunda generación. Trabajo en el Jardín Japonés, profesora de Giovanna, el Colegio Novo. No sé qué otro dato me puedo dar. Okay. Gracias.
Felisa from Argentina, and then she was she was in the Japanese gardens, and she teaches the Ikebana, right? Yes, and she doesn't know what else to share with you guys.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Mario Zaqueta, argentino, estoy en Buenos Aires y participo de la COPANI desde la tercera COPANI de 1985. Vengo continuamente a todos los COPANI para seguir cómo avanza y espero que cada vez avancen más rápido. Gracias.
Translator.
Yeah.
Oh,
Were you listening?
Mario Zaqueta from Argentina. They're all from the same place. Your first COPANI, primero?
Tercer COPANI, 85.
Oh, 86, right? 86. That's it. I got lost.
Yeah, and he's been participating in all the COPANI since then.
Okay, good.
Hi, I'm Patty. I'm from here in San Francisco. I'm a Sansei, and really growing up in the Japantown area helped shape my identity as a Japanese American. And let's see, something you don't know. My grandmother's side of the family, she's Issei, came from Tokyo, and then my grandfather's side came from a small whaling village called Taiji.
My name is Kiyoshi Batani. I'm from Toronto. I'm just recovering from getting my suit jacket back where I had my passport in. So my mind is still on how lucky can I be, right? I don't have much to add other than the fact that I've been retired 19 years, but during my working years, I was an insurance broker.
Hi, my name is Ernest Hida from Los Angeles, California. As far as gender preference, you can call me anything you want. But anyway, in Los Angeles, in Southern California, we have the largest Japanese and Nikkei community for the United States. And within that community, there's always differentials in attitude. And so we have to deal with that in our different organizations. So, thank you.
My name is Joy Oto, and I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And I was quite heavily involved in the redress thing with Art Mickey. He's also happens to be my cousin, but that's not the reason. But I'm proud to say he's my cousin. And something that you can't tell by looking at me, I worked for Billy Graham at one point. There you go.
Big name around here. Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Takemiya. I'm actually from Berkeley as well, and I prefer he, him pronouns. I'm a professional actor, and something you can't tell by looking at me is that I'm actually half Japanese, half Chinese.
Hello, my name is Ray Ohki. I'm from San Francisco, California, aka Daly City, California. But I say San Francisco, otherwise you don't know. Preferred pronouns, he and him. También soy profesor de español aquí en San Francisco. I'm also a Spanish teacher. Chotto nihongo hanasemasu.
Hi, konnichiwa, minasan. I'm Japanese speaking, and from Toronto, Canada. And preferred name, please call me Denbo-san. Denbo-san. My last name is Denbo. I'm working for Japanese Canadian, also Chinese Canadian. Chinese people, they prefer for me Denbo. Kiyoshi is very difficult to pronounce, so Denbo-san. And I'm a speech therapist and also community programs coordinator in Toronto. And I'm a Ji-chan. Ji-chan was my first granddaughter living in Hong Kong. The second granddaughter living in Wales in England. Hong Kong and England, so we can meet only Christmas time.
Well, my name is Karina Tamaki Uehara. I'm from Winnipeg, but originally from Buenos Aires. I work for the National Association of Japanese Canadians, and I also teach Spanish.
Go ahead. Finish up. Are you done? Okay. My name is Ramses Mickey Hansen. I'm from Saskatoon, Canada. He, him, I suppose. Something you'd like to know about me. This is my first COPANI. I'm a Gosei. Yesterday, Arthur Mickey, one of the speakers, he's my great uncle. So we're related.
Oh,
So it's always nice meeting new relatives at COPANI.
My name is Sugio Kuroshima. I'm from Victoria, Canada. He, him. This is my first COPANI, and I'm the president of the local Japanese Cultural Association. I've been for 25-year existence. And something that I still play hockey.
Hey, I'm Kevin Okabe. I'm from Calgary, Canada. Houston is the north. All that against me, though. He, him. I am the executive director of the National Association of Japanese Canadians. You're doing a great job. What do you need? I am an accomplished accordionist, though. Most people don't know that of me. Of course, I wanted to play the piano. My dad liked polkas.
My name is Amy Kasama. I am from Paraguay. You say from Paraguay. Yes, I used to be a researcher of the Japanese immigration in Paraguay and also in the Latin American countries. I published several books about that. And I am very interested in gender, especially for women. And I was also to defend the human rights in America Latina. When I dedicated to volunteer service since near 50 years ago. And this is my goal and my work today. I am continuous offering my service to others, like Ikigai. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paula Fujiwara. I'm actually here from San Francisco. She, her. I'm one of the world's experts in tuberculosis worldwide, and some other thing is that yo hablo también español y soy experta en tuberculosis.
My name is Satya Saka. As you know, yesterday I spoke about 39 years history of COPANI. So I am not Nikkeis actually, just a Japanese, but I really agree to the way of Nikkei way COPANI. So I am here. Thank you.
My name is Midori Yamamoto, and I'm from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, although I grew up on the other coast, East Coast. She, her. I work in rural family medicine and have traveled to really tiny towns in British Columbia. In some of the villages, the older kind of indigenous, like grandma, grandpas, remember some of the Japanese who used to live there, so they have stories. I found out recently that my great-grandmother was the daughter of a professional sumo wrestler.
Hello, I'm Sanae Ohki from Edmonton, Canada. I'm a president of Edmonton Japanese Community Association. And our association used to be a Canadian Japanese Association, but now we are inviting more Canadian, just the Canadian people who has interest into a Japanese culture. and say out of 800 members, more than half is Canadian. So we are looking for new direction of kind of growing and sharing Japanese culture with more wider Canadian people. Edmonton is about 3 hours ride from Rocky Mountain. My hobby is skiing in the winter.
I'm Linda Kalmoto. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I work at the UK National Museum. Prefer she and here her. What was I going to say? Oh, I'm a Sansei. Something that you can't tell by looking at me, well, my father was Japanese Canadian, is that my mother's family came from the Ukraine, fleeing the First World War, and they were homesteaders in Canada. Okay, last, is there anyone out in the hallway? I'm Sherry Kajiwara. I am from Vancouver, Canada, presently, although I was born in Kumamoto, Japan, Kyushu. I prefer she, her. I am the director-curator of the Nikkei National Museum in Burnaby, which is part of Metro Vancouver. And something you might not know by looking at me is that I've just curated a Nikkei identity exhibit at our museum that I hope some of you will come see if you visit us in Vancouver.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh, would you like to come in and sit down? Yeah, please come in. So, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we're finishing up introductions. Would you like to, hold on, would you like to introduce yourself? Just no. So thanks everyone for telling us a little bit about yourself. What I'd like to do next is tell you a little bit about me, and I'm mindful of our time, so I'm going to keep it kind of short, and feel free to ask me questions if you'd like. As I said, I was born and raised in Berkeley, California. And can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
On my father's side, I'm Sansei. My father's parents were from Okinawa. And on my mother's side, I'm Yonsei. My mother's grandparents were from Nara and Nagano. And I started studying Japanese when I was a freshman in college at UC San Diego. I grew up with very few Japanese words in the home. Daily conversation was all English, and it was pretty much food words that we had. A couple years ago, I published a book called Redefining Japaneseness. And so that was why they asked me to run a workshop today, because I do research on Japanese American identity. And this first book focused on Japanese Americans who are born and raised on the US continent and in Hawaii, who as adults go and live in Japan. So they're of varying ethnic generations, varying Japanese language abilities, so they have all kinds of different experiences. I thought about the project. I came up with the topic because I myself was born and raised on the US continent, and I lived in Japan 3 different times for a total of 9 years. So the first time, I was a college exchange student in Tokyo at International Christian University, and I spent my junior year there. Then I went back, I graduated from UC San Diego, and I spent 3 years on the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, the JET program. So I was a coordinator of international relations. I worked at a city hall, and I lived in a town called Iyama in Nagano. It's beautiful if you get the chance to go. It's great. 1998, I returned to the United States. I was in Berkeley for a couple years, and then I started graduate school in Hawaii. And I lived in Honolulu for 4 years, attended the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I was working on a PhD in sociology. And as part of my dissertation fieldwork, then I went back to Japan and spent a year in Yokohama doing language study at the Inter-University Center. So I
I took classes, if you know Yokohama, I took classes near the Chinatown at the Minato Mirai area, and I lived in Kotobukicho. So yeah, very different neighborhoods. And then after that, then I lived for 4 years in Chiba while I was writing my dissertation and doing my interviews, and then I taught a little bit at Sophia University and was affiliated with the university. So there's a couple different ways that I came to this topic, and I just wanted to tell you this to help to start think about sort of what it means to be Japanese, what it means to be Nikkei, because to me it's all connected. So first, when I was in college, I started taking classes on Japanese society. And in those classes, we learned that in Japan, there's Japanese and there's foreigners, Nihonjin and Gaijin. And based on my experiences as a Japanese American living in Japan, I realized that sometimes people treated me like I was Japanese, and sometimes people treated me like I was a foreigner. And you can try to think, well, does this apply to Nikkei communities, right, in your respective countries? But anyway, this binary, this assumption that there's only Japanese and foreigners, and everyone can fit into one category or the other, I thought there's something complicated there that Japanese Americans, or Nikkei, can help us to understand. Specifically coming from the United States, and specifically coming from the US continent, I also grew up identifying not just as Japanese American, but specifically as Asian American. Because on the US continent, if you're Japanese American, then you're necessarily Asian American. So Japanese equals Asian. Like it's just sort of commonsensical that if you're Japanese, then you're Asian. But when I went to Japan, if I identified as Asian American, or as Asian, or with other people I saw as Asian, they didn't necessarily identify with me. And they didn't see the same categories that I saw. And so I noticed that in the United States, specifically, the US continent, and in Japan, there were different ways that people were grouped, different ways that people were labeled. So for me, like I'm the same person. I have the same history, the same characteristics, the way that I look, the languages I speak, but in the United States, in California, people will label me and interpret me and treat me in certain ways, right? They'll make assumptions based on the mainstream society, right, and how we see people. Now, the same person, when I go to Japan, people see me in entirely different ways. And I'm the same person, but the society's categories, the ways that we think about ethnicity and race, and assumptions about what you look like and the language you speak and the knowledge that you have about culture and who you identify with. All of that is different everywhere you go. So if you've lived in different places, if you've traveled or lived in different places, this is probably very familiar to you. But I think it's something that not everyone is familiar with. So I wanted to talk about this and to help people to see that when we go to different places, we can't assume that everything will be the same in terms of not just how we identify, but how people will treat us and include us as parts of their communities or not. So for my research, I had a few questions. As people who are both Japanese and foreign, how do Japanese Americans learn to identify in Japan? How do Japanese American experiences and strategies for identifying in Japan change over time? So over time, right, it's dynamic, it changes. And how does living in Japan affect how Japanese Americans identify? So I'm going to share with you one finding just from the book, just to give you a sense of my interest here. So previous research has looked at the large population of Japanese Brazilians in Japan. And that research has found that Japanese Brazilians who go and live in Japan develop stronger national identities as Brazilians. So I was trying to think about how Japanese Americans compare to Japanese Brazilians. And I found that Japanese Americans from the US continent and from Hawaii have different experiences in Japan. And so Japanese Americans from the US continent reconstruct Japanese American identities, while Japanese Americans from Hawaii reconstruct just Hawaii identities. And I'll explain that. So like I said, previous research on Nikkei in Japan has looked at Japanese Brazilians, Brazilian Nikkei as developing stronger national identities as Brazilians. And this is a great book if you're interested in more. Takayuki Tsuda is an anthropologist who's done a lot of work with Japanese Brazilians. But I found that Japanese Americans from the US continent, they're dealing with an image of Americans in Japan as people who look white. So when Japanese Americans go to Japan, and to be clear, this finding focuses on Japanese Americans who are phenotypically or physically similar to Japanese. So I have another chapter that looks at mixed race Japanese Americans who are not necessarily phenotypically similar to most Japanese. So when Japanese Americans look similar to most Japanese, if they go to Japan, then they're dealing with an image of Americans as white, and then usually, then if they say that they're American, then that causes a little bit of confusion, and they have to explain that either their ancestral background is Japanese, or that what their ethnic mix is, right? So even if you were, say, Chinese and Japanese, if you said you were American, ethnically Chinese and Japanese, if you said Japan that you were American, then most Japanese might question that, say, oh, well, but you don't look American, or how can you be American? Are you mixed? And then you would probably have to explain your ancestral background. So as a result, then these Japanese Americans learn to identify as Japanese American because they're not just American, just a standalone with no questions. They have to explain that they're Japanese American. Meanwhile, Japanese Americans from Hawaii are dealing with an image in Japan of people from Hawaii that include people who may look Japanese. And in Japan, there is a knowledge that in Hawaii there are many people of Japanese ancestry. So when someone who looks physically similar to most Japanese in Japan says they're from Hawaii, the typical response is, oh, Hawaii, I love Hawaii. And there's no question of, oh, you're from Hawaii, how could you look the way you do, or what does that mean? So, so then the identification as being from Hawaii is reinforced. So what can we conclude from this? That the different ways that Nikkei learn to identify in Japan are shaped by Japanese views of where they're from, and also the ways that they respond to that and assert themselves. So what I want you to think about here is the ways that identities are interactive, right? We may say that we are this, or we may see ourselves in a certain way, but sometimes people see us in ways that don't match that. Like, if I see myself in a certain way, and everyone else sees me in that same way, then I won't think about it. It's just, everything's smooth. If I see myself in a certain way, and everyone else sees me in a different way, then I have choices to make. Do I push and say, no, it's not that, I'm this? Or do I try to accept the way that people see me and negotiate that? Right? So the ways that we identify are shaped by a combination of how people see us and how we respond to that, how we assert ourselves. In the interest of time, I'm actually going to skip some of the conclusions from the book because I want to get us to discussion. So if there's time, we can go back to this, or I can. Okay. So I just want to jump to my current research very quickly. Now I'm looking at Okinawan identity construction on the U.S. continent. And this came about, these questions came about because growing up in California, I saw myself as Japanese American with one side from Okinawa. And I never learned that Okinawans could be seen as different. I went to Hawaii for graduate school, and I would introduce myself at different events. Hi, my name's Jane Yamashiro. And people would say to me, oh, you're Okinawan. And I was like, oh, how did you know that? Because I didn't know that there were typical Okinawan names. So I learned that there were. And then I would explain, well, my dad's family was from Okinawa, and my mom's family was from Nara. And then they would say, oh, so you're half Okinawan. and I had never heard that before. So then I thought, well, if I'm half Okinawan, then what does that mean? How is it different from being Japanese? Right? So then I became curious, like, how do we create meaning for this? And when and why do people make this distinction? So that's what my research is looking at. So when I lived in Hawaii, I learned a lot about what it means to be Okinawan in Hawaii. And there's a lot of research that looks at what it means to be Okinawan in Okinawa or in mainland Japan. But not as much has been looked at for Okinawans on the US continent in terms of experiences more recently. So that's what I'm looking at. And so let's get to the rest of the workshop. Okay. What I'd like to do is have us get into groups to talk about what it means to be Nikkei. So if you could get into groups of about 3 or 4, then I've got some questions here for you to discuss, and you can pick and choose. I'd like to spend maybe half an hour for you to get into these groups, discuss things, and then try to get back in the big group and share. So we'll see how we can manage the time. But first, if you can think about, like, what does it mean to you personally to be Nikkei? And maybe there are other workshops you've attended or other conferences, or, you know, I'm very happy to hear that there are a lot of community leaders and people very involved in research on Nikkei. And so I know that these are things that you may have thought about a lot. So in addition to what it means to you personally to be Nikkei, if you could think about how it's changed over time, like I said, the way that identities are dynamic. Maybe when you were younger, you thought of yourself or what it meant to be Nikkei in certain ways, or maybe before you attended a COPANI conference, or before you became involved in your local community, before you took on the job that you have or used to have. But you think about that change, and then these are some ideas. This is not an extensive list. Like, there's more things we can think about. But just to start, what kinds of factors shape Nikkei identities? So just think, how is it different by gender? And you can think about your own experiences, or you can think about stories you've heard, or things that you've seen. How is it different by sexual orientation? Depending on physical appearance, depending on your last name, depending on how much Japanese you speak, depending on ethnic generation, by country and or society. So countries, but also within the same country, there's differences between Hawaii and the continent. And just depending on where you are and who you're around. If you were with a group of people that look similar to you or speak the same language, you speak a certain language, or you're with a different group of people that look a different way or speak a different language, or whatever comes to mind. So these are just to kind of help you start thinking. So groups of 3 to 4, if you could just choose groups of 3 to 4, and then just start these discussions, and I'll let you know as we need to kind of wrap up and get back into the big group.
Should we just count all? Like, what do you prefer to count? Do about 30 people?
Did you want to do it by region, like the Canadian get together and Spanish?
No,
Would you prefer?
I'm just going to leave it that it's random, except for the Spanish speakers.
I was gonna, whatever the group, I was just gonna say, if you want to get together, but if you want to make sure that you get in groups with people you don't know, you can, is that what the group would like? Do you want me to count everyone off?
Okay, count off, then we'll all have to give it.
Okay.
So we could just sit.
There's a vote over here for not moving. That's what we're discussing.
Accessibility issues and language. language in terms of diversity
Yeah.
language or being
I'm with you.
standard?
I'm with you.
I don't speak
It's too hot to move, I think.
The Spanish speakers need to pull together, I think, because how are they going to interact with the English speakers and vice versa? I can go with the Spanish group. I would love to go with the Spanish speakers.
Well, I am a supporter of of us as a group, kind of making a group decision. So I'd like to be flexible and allow people to kind of make choices that they want to make. There's some people that don't want to move, and there's accessibility that I would respect if if moving around is not convenient or comfortable for people. But there's language issues too. So if people wanted to congregate in a certain area for Spanish speakers. Can I let you get into your own groups of 3 or 4? Is that okay? Let's do that.
So we don't have to move. Yeah. Us 4.
Not moving.
Yeah.
So one thing I guess.
If we could get back into the big group and just do a tiny bit of meetings in each group, that would be
I did a great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, do that. Sure. Oh,
Okay, I'm glad you had some great discussions. I'm sorry to have to pull you away from them. The workshop, it's really, the time goes by quickly, so I wish we had more time, but I'm glad you had some great discussions. If we could just go around in each group, we could just say like a minute or 2 of what you talked about, anything you want to share with the big group. I'll leave it up to you what you'd like to share. If you're able to address the questions specifically, that would be ideal, but whatever your group talked about, a couple of main points. Who would like to start?
See, right there.
So we
That's
have
very Japanese, right?
the ones in
Look at
Canada and the mainland represent Colorado and New Mexico, Chicago. So we're diverse, but we didn't have any Spanish speakers except one who's partially from Costa Rica. So we actually talked a bit about having grown up in the continent and Hawaii, but then we also talked about our experiences. Almost everyone in our group has had an experience of, well, actually everyone had either a visit or living in Japan. So understanding that experience, it was interesting as we talked about how your conclusions from your research versus our personal experience and conclusions. And it seemed to pretty much align. Someone came back feeling very Canadian after their experience in Japan, and someone coming back feeling very Hawaii after being in Japan. So no, it was a good conversation, and we didn't stick too much to the questions here, but just talking more about our experiences and talking about the generation and how the relevance of history and how it's going to be going forward. I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
Good, no, that's good.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good one. Okay, next group.
Our group? Okay, our group discussed in order to preserve the culture, it's important to maintain family values. You know, the Japanese family values that respect the elders is like the most important one that I think is very Japanese. One of the very Japanese things, you know. And we talk so much. I was with Spanish speakers, what did you say? But yeah, the Nikkei, I mean, it was a controversy whether you look Japanese or you have Japanese blood, what is that? So we say that it doesn't matter how you look, and it doesn't matter how much percentage you have, but if you have some Japanese, then you're Nikkei. Okay?
Thank you.
So,
I think you're being tasked with whatever you talked about is fine.
We had 4 people here, 2 from the US and 2 from Canada. Most of our discussion took place regarding all the similarities we've got and our experiences with Japanese from Japan and how similar our experiences are with that group. Unfortunately, we didn't spend any time on what are we looking forward, right? So I've got nothing to report from our group regarding that subject.
So we talked about a lot of stuff. We discussed how being Nikkei doesn't necessarily have to do with blood. It can be a lot more about interest in the culture, and how there are many different points of entry for that interest. It's not just one. It's not just about history. It's not just about heritage. It could be any one of these things. It's like a cloud of different things. There are a million different aspects of being Nikkei that can draw people in, and then it becomes an individual decision in many ways, because it doesn't just have to do with how people see you. It has to do with how you see yourself. Whether or not you see yourself as Nikkei, that is a very personal decision, and can be different from person to person, even within families. Even within individual members of a family, and how there are things that being Nikkei is. It's almost like nature versus nurture, right? It's like it's not just the macro things, but it's the micro things that have to do with mannerisms and behavior that we don't even really are aware that we're doing. There are things that are Nikkei that we just do. And we don't know that we're doing them until we see other people doing them, and we're like, oh, I do that. And even though you grew up somewhere else than I grew up, and we may have grown up thousands of miles away from each other, but we both do this thing where we both don't want to be talked the first time. Oh no, you talk. No, you talk. That's like it's a Nikkei thing. There's like a million little things that make up being Nikkei, and a lot of those things we don't really have words for. But you know it when you see it. And even if you've never met this person before, or even if they might be from another country, they do something and you see it and you're like, that's Nikkei. That I do that. And it's a beautiful moment. Anyway, that's what we're talking about.
Very well put.
We were talking and having this discussion based on it is with the Asaka contribution. She has the point of view from more as a Japanese also, but also this side is what we live here. And we were talking about that the Japanese I learned was 60, 80 years old Japanese. So when I became translator for the company where I work for today, at the beginning my boss says, what word just you use? I say, well, I say for ruler, monosashi. But he says, no one's in Japan uses monosashi. That was when I was in elementary school. He says, now it's jogi. So I started learning more Japanese being translator in the company. But in reality, my experience as a Japanese Mexican is that, yes, we are different. Yes, there is at school, when I brought the onigiri, my other, how you call this? classmates. The classmates said, "Do you eat stones?" It was in the 70s. Now everybody wants to know about sushi, about chopsticks and all these things. Today are more interested, but in the 70s it was a little bit difficult. But yes, it is something that makes us different. Also in Japan, when we travel in Japan, I was treated not as a Japanese. I was an Ohki at that moment. Even though I tried hard to speak my Japanese, I was foreign Gaijin. So this is something that is positive because we have both of two good cultures. One of your heritage culture that is good if you want to choose the good things, because it's something to choose. We can choose also bad things. But also there is for the local culture that we also can choose to absorb the best of our local culture or the worst. But I think that most of the time we choose to serve. I don't know, but I see here a lot of people that in so many ways serve to the community or serve your society in different ways, or help others, and that's something that defines us too. And another thing in Mexico, in the case of Mexico, with this face, is in the past I was a Chinese. Everywhere I go, people call me Chinese, Chinese, Chinese. I grew up at school with the nickname Chinese. Right? That was my nickname. but at the end, today is people trust in Japan a lot. If you have a Japanese roots, the doors open immediately. But also at school, I remember that at the university, people, the teachers expect more from me always. Yeah, because I expect more, from the average, they expect more because I was Japanese origin. That's the thing that makes it. But yeah, it is a good thing to be cultural.
Thank you. Okay, last group. Okay, so we had a small group, and we're all Canadian, but actually we hadn't all met. Well, Linda and I worked together, so that's a bit of a cheat. But what was interesting was a lot of it has already been said. The whole nature-nurture thing was very relevant in terms of whether the whole Nikkei identity question was not even a question, and there was it wasn't a question until it was. Okay, wait. Let me back up. There was Linda's family, for example. She's already explained to you that she's part Ukrainian and part Japanese Canadian, but that her Japanese family really embraced. The family was very embraced by the Japanese side of that equation, so she had no question about the Japanese side of her. And Tsuyo, on the other hand, grew up in Winnipeg and was very much assimilating to be white in the younger years, but then became very active in the redress years and much more community-minded. So the influence did change slightly over time. I'm an oddity because I'm born in Japan and adopted into an Nikkei family, so I guess I'm legally sensei, but I'm also not separated. It was a private adoption, so I'm not separated from my group family in Japan who speak no English and who are very Japanese. But I guess one example I can give is that it does matter about nature-nurture. It does matter about timing and the way the world has embraced Japan, or Japanese qualities separately. It's really cool to be Japanese right now, right? So, sushi and manga and whatever. But the biggest example I can give of, because I've never felt one way or the other, and I actually have to confess I didn't even know the term Nikkei until I started working at the Nikkei Center. But because in my earlier years I was in contemporary art in Canada, but it was very white-based. The gallery was owned by white owners, and we did a lot of work. They hired me as a Japanese translator, actually, initially, and we were doing shows in Hong Kong. We were in a Chinese restaurant, and the mother-in-law of the owner turns to me and says, "Sherry, we're the only Caucasians in this room." And I'm like, "Lorna, yes we are." And then flip side, I'm in Tokyo trying to buy flowers to go visit my aunt. And the flower vendor knows I'm not from there. We're speaking Japanese. And he's like, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Canada," which is the Japanese accent on Canada. And he's like, "Eh?" And he's like giving me all these words. Karuizawa? Kanagawa? Like he's asking me if I'm from, because he doesn't know where Canada is, because he's never placed it in Japan. So I said, America. So America, like he's saying, you cannot be from over there, right? So he goes, where were you born? And I said, Kumamoto. He goes, that explains it. And it's not, I don't speak Kumamoto Ben or anything, but again, trying to fit me in, right, to what you were saying earlier about that. So I find that interesting, and I find it a real privilege to be Japanese Canadian and to be able to navigate all of that. And I think we have a real opportunity as Nikkei moving forward to really embrace the best of all of our experiences from whatever country we're at, and to be proud of all sides of that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm wearing my teacher hat now, trying to think, how do I cover some of the material that I wanted us to get to, but mindful of the time. So I'm going to try to combine a couple things. We'll see if this works. I wanted us to have a space to brainstorm. And I know it's tough because it's a conference where it's great to talk and meet people and hear different experiences, but I've been tasked with trying to get us to think about the future of the community. So I'm going to pull you towards that and just start brainstorming. So to just think about this question, many of you are involved with Nikkei organizations in your local areas, or you've been involved in community, or there's something that brought you to this conference. You identify in a certain way, there's something that brought you to this conference. So if you can picture sort of Nikkei community and what you imagine that to be, like who's represented, right? What does it usually mean to be Nikkei? If you were to explain to someone what it means to be Nikkei, who are Nikkei people, how would you explain that generally? So I want you to keep that in mind. And then I want you to think kind of in a different direction about reasons that people that could be described as Nikkei might not identify as Nikkei and might not feel included in Nikkei communities. Because I think we spend a lot of time when we think about what it means to be Nikkei. We think, okay, of the people in our communities, what do we do, what do we want, who are we? And I think that's great. We need to keep doing that. But now, if we're thinking about community building, if we're thinking about the future, if we can think about the opposite, who could be Nikkei, but isn't here, or isn't in the local Nikkei events or organizations or communities, who's not there? And let's just kind of go the opposite way for a minute. And I want to just brainstorm. So you could think about people that you know personally, reasons why they don't, maybe it's a family member or a friend or someone you've met, you tried to tell them about your organization, tried to invite them to something, but they weren't interested. What was it? And try to think that way. So people who could be Nikkei, who could identify as Nikkei, but maybe don't. Or maybe they identify as Nikkei, but they don't come to events, or they don't feel included. So just to think about it that way. And I'm going to put it up here. Give you a second to think about it. I'm just gonna type things up here because it's probably the easiest for everyone to see. So if you could just raise your hand or just let me know, kind of, yeah. What are
Anyway, I'm Sansei, but I've always been told by my parents that all of us Nikkei, all of us, I don't care where you're from, but all of us left Japan. Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, all left Japan for a bad reason. We all left Japan. There was a problem. It's like the Irish famine. I think all of us left Japan. We all needed jobs. Maybe because we were we weren't like chonan, which means we were not a first-generation kid. It was always the reason why we left Japan. My parents always told me this scenario. So So that's the reason why my parents always have told me, just kind of like, I'm in a situation, you know, I'm not really American, I'm not really Japanese, and I'm Japanese, but I'm not really American. They never voted, they didn't feel like they were American. And then on the other hand, I have my daughter who is fourth generation, who is just the opposite. I'm totally, you know, I'm not even, I don't feel like I'm even Japanese, I'm just totally American. So that's interesting, the way of, I think all of us, I'm not sure if anybody else feels the same way, that we were all descendants of Japanese. We all came within 120 years. We all came to America in the past 120 years, is that right? To find a better life, and then most of our descendants wanted to come back to Japan. They didn't want to come here, but they wanted to find that pot of gold. And like my grandparents, that was the case. They went back to Japan because they found that pot of gold and came back to the mothership.
So I'm trying to sort of pull from what you're
Yeah.
saying and summarize it. I'm not sure if this reflects exactly what you wanted to say, but you were talking about sort of being Japanese, but being American, and so maybe it's unclear what Nikkei means. So for people who are not identifying as Nikkei or coming to Nikkei community or events, maybe they're not sure either. So
My parents, yeah, they didn't feel that they were American, you know. They didn't vote, they didn't do American, you know, they didn't want to even speak English, you know. I mean, they felt so Japanese, always eating Japanese food, and just kind of don't go to, you know, they just didn't want to out of the box, but knew they would never return as Japanese. Maybe they wouldn't return to Japan, that's all, so.
yeah, great.
Sorry. Yeah, just to, I think to try and synthesize what you're saying, I think it all has a lot to do with how strong of a connection you feel to Japan. Right. So like there are people, I know young people who are, you know, are Japanese. They're born in Japan, but they live here now, and they've lived here for many years. But they still feel that strong connection to Japan, and that's why they would not come to something like this. They'd be like, oh, that's for you guys. That's for you. It's not for me. Even though they've been living here for 10, 15, 20 years. And I try to keep telling them, like, look, if you've been here for at least like 5 years, you're American. I mean, I don't care. You eat at McDonald's, you're American. Like, it's time. It's time. You're one of us now. But they don't. Because they still feel that strong pull to Japan.
So just to clarify, so your point isn't that these people don't feel a strong connection. It's because they feel a strong connection to Japan that they don't identify as Nikkei. They identify
As Japanese.
As Japanese.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my point was a little bit different in that, you know, I work in research and genealogy in the National Museum. And the most common thing is that the stories can get passed down from the first generation to the second generation. So the second generation, a lot of them who went through the internment, right, even, it's just like a taboo subject, right? So in terms of identity, I think, I don't know what you can call this, but it seems like a loss of memory about identity or something like that, where it's almost kind of like blanked out in a lot of, well, in Canada, it's and it's, you know, it's the later generations, the third and the fourth generation that are so saying, oh, wait a minute. We want to explore that part of our
I know so many people like that who are third and fourth generation who have never been to Japan, don't want to even learn how to speak Japanese, but are so proud to be, you know, I'm Japanese because sushi and all that kind of, you know, BS, you know, but have never been to Japan, don't want to go to Japan, don't want to learn how to speak Japanese. I think identity like that is so true.
We have discussed about the identity of the Nikkei, or the significant, and we said that those people serve the small block of Japanese are considered Nikkei. And also, those who are interested in Japanese culture, who love Japanese things, even they are not Japanese people, they would consider as Japanese because in Paraguay, we bring one of the young men, and he's full Paraguayan, but he considered Nikkei because he loved Japanese, all Japanese, he's involved in our community, involved in Japanese activity. So that is the feeling that more than real Nikkei, he loves Japanese. So in kanji, we consider Nikkei or Nisei, we have two words. One is Japanese, and another is the country with the word. In any case, it's Japanese Paraguayan. So we have three words to demonstrate, especially the third generation versus three. And the fourth generation, they consider it more Paraguayan than Japanese. So that's very interesting. But the important thing is to transmit the culture and the disciplines and the Japanese virtue to those people. And once upon a time, came from Japan, a Christ and the artist. He said all those Japanese heritage also. And I asked those who was born in other countries, is because the Japanese heritage is very deep in the performance of our song.
Thank you. Okay, maybe we'll take one more comment and then try to move on to the end of wrapping up.
This is my personal opinion. I don't differentiate between Japanese and Nikkei. And the reason I say that is because you can't be a Nikkei, in my interpretation, unless you're somewhat Japanese, like 10%, 100%, or whatever it is. I don't know what the general feeling here is, but how can you change one and separate them into two? What I'm saying is, you can't be a Nikkei unless you're Japanese. I can't imagine a Eugene person being a Nikkei.
Although in some places you don't necessarily have to have Japanese ancestry to identify as an Nikkei. So okay, actually this is a great, really sort of provocative statement that I think draws on several things that were already mentioned. So let's, and again I apologize for not having more time. These workshops just go so fast. I'd like to jump to wrapping up, and specifically, I'd like to go around, give everybody one more chance to say something to contribute to the discussion. And if you could in particular try to think about some of these comments about Japanese versus Nikkei, Nikkei including people who are not of Japanese ancestry. Does it mean something to be Nikkei? So really, if you could end with sort of your brief thought about Nikkei and where we're going in the future. So one final thought about Nikkei and the future.
10 seconds.
So yeah, I know it's quite quick, but our goal today was supposed to try to talk about the future a little bit, to think about this conference theme, because these are things that in each of our local communities we need to think about, like what direction are we going in, and who are we targeting, and who are we including, who are we not including, how do we think about what a Nikkei activity is, or a Nikkei membership for something. So however you want to address that, if you want to say something about the boundaries of being Nikkei, or the boundaries of being Nikkei versus non-Nikkei, or Nikkei versus Japanese, or do you not see those boundaries? Like what do you want to leave us with as your thoughts about being Nikkei and the future? and what do you want to contribute to this discussion for everyone to hear and take away today? Okay? So, let's see, since we started here last time, should we start on this end this time and go around? Okay.
So, the last comment about how much Japanese ancestry or blood do you need to be a Nikkei? I was up there, the same side as gentleman on there. It seemed to me that you would have to have Japanese blood, some percentage to be Nikkei. But then if you look in the future with all the intermarriage, you're going to have descendants that are going to have a minuscule portion of them being descendants, and they classified as Nikkei. So maybe we have to think about expanding the definition of Nikkei.
Final thought in terms of the discussion is that I endeavor to and would hope that we could embrace the best of both, of whether we are Japanese or identify Nikkei, or myself, I'm a Japanese Canadian. I endeavor to embrace the most of my Japaneseness and my Canadianness, and if I can do that, then I think it would be contributing to. But I also like this global dialogue that's happening, and I think the more of us from all different aspects of Nikkei or Japanese ancestry can talk to each other, that we can have a brighter future.
One of our Canadian scholars says that we're not getting smaller, we're getting larger in terms of the Nikkei concept, and I would hope that we continue to get larger. And I would hope that the people who consider themselves Japanese would join us. And also we have another scholar who wrote a book on, that was the seminal book for redress, who's Sanae. She married a Japanese Canadian, and to me she's like, she's white, and she's like, pretty Nikkei, with the kids and all that. And so I think inclusiveness is what I would say.
Our association thinks we'd like to share Nikkei and or Japanese culture in Canadian society. Not only for Nikkei or Japanese, but it's more like sharing culture with many people. So that's the direction we are going.
I'm Victoria from Canada. Just thinking about that inclusivity versus kind of excluded thing. Just some comments I've heard about from people who do not participate. It's almost rude, so I'm kind of wondering whether I should say this or not, but
I remember we're being videotaped.
Oh,
I'm not trying to censor anyone, I just want you to know for your reference.
Thank you.
And these obviously are not things that you're saying, they're things that you've heard.
Yes, but I'm talking about inclusiveness and exclusiveness can be painful. So
I just want you to
yes,
know your options and know your
and so I was speaking to a young Yonsei, who's like quarter European, quarter Japanese, quarter Chinese. Anyway, she moved to a bigger city with a Japanese Canadian cultural center, and so she was kind of dipping her toes into the community. And then, but she said she was disappointed because she said it was just all white people who were really interested in Japan. Like that was her experience, and so she kind of laughed. And then some other comments from people who have were brought up in Japan or whatnot. In these Nikkei events, I've heard comments of people saying, I just feel like a prop being used because the Nikkei people don't have a culture. So that's why they need us to do the kimono, so I've heard that and then, anyway, so just some thoughts.
That's helpful to hear.
Well, from the viewpoint for Japan.
Japanese people to learn Nikkei. You know, I think now is World Cup rugby, and also probably the next year Olympic Games, we can see another very different paradigm in Japan, because in Japan it happens. For example, Naomi Osaka, we consider Japanese, and other players are very many heritages. We consider we counting Japanese people. Now this is the situation. So in this case, in the next Olympic game, we can probably see more very advanced Japanese paradigm, because our field is changing. The corner field changed very much. We are really accustomed to many roots of many races, Japanese species. So I think and also I teach in university. Also I know the young people have the idea of the diversity and reliability to the other countries, also the people, including other foreigners. So I think I feel Japan will change so much, and also the Japanese foreign policy and government policy is changed so strong. Like you know, this time the ambassador of specialist of council, special Nikkei society is coming. So I think I feel the Japanese society will change even in few years. I think it changed very much. Thank you. Actually, my husband is her brother, older brother. And I'm from Washington, D.C. Actually, in 1967, my husband came as a Fulbright student at the Georgetown University. Actually, he graduated, and he had to go back to his country, serve 2 years in Alaska, but he got job offer from the United Nations. So he ended up staying and he worked for IDB until he retired. Then he came back to Paraguay. He was the assistant to the advisor to finance minister. Then he just passed away. So I'm still here, very strong here. Whatever I can do. Yeah, I have 3 children. One is in New York, 2 in Japan, Australia. So next 2 years we do it in Paraguay. So I hope everybody comes. I wish my husband was there, sorry. But I'm aware if I work hard, I welcome everybody. Thank you.
I think this kind of discussion in different countries is very positive and important, because we let us know about the experience of each country, the Nikkeis, the consideration and identity of each Nikkei. So it's possible to be communicated by the media or internet or in order to explain the principle to publish, or you can publish through the media about our discussion. And especially the Nikkei have the virtue in many reasons, as I explained before, and so, especially in Paraguay, we consider that the Nikkei, they have no problem in politics. other countries. So this is a very good example to follow among them. And that experience became drawing us in order to, because we have a lot of political knowledge and identities, and how we can improve that with Japanese literature or Japanese what their culture in order to portray more history and everything.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Just to be succinct, I think the word that comes to mind is just to be fluid, without being co-opted by others outside of the Nikkei community, but also not co-opting from the outside.
Okay, thank you.
I must say my brain kind of hurts. In Canada, the use of Nikkei, at least in my mind, hasn't been that common because of what it's related to. But I definitely have a broader understanding of what that means from coming to this. That being said, at our last session we had with the youth, we had one very strong comment that everyone that had tried to describe what it was to be Nikkei came up with something different. So to me, it seems that that definition is really individual. Yeah. So each person tries to attach it to themselves in some way. And then for, I guess complicated was the other word that was being used too. And I think that's really what it truly is to me, my own reflection, is saying that, in Canada, I think we stress that diversity is strength. And that's what we need to embrace in terms of inclusiveness and stuff. So I think for people to explore that journey to be Nikkei or not is probably up to them to do. But I think this joint exercise with the different nations has definitely given me different insights and a lot of things. But really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I grew up in a community that doesn't really have a lot of Japanese Canadians. I didn't grow up going to any community events or really having anything to do with, besides my immediate family being part Japanese. And in that way I was really ostracized from the greater community. I didn't really have much knowledge of it. So just touching on what was said earlier down there, when I became a university student, I joined the Japanese Culture Club at my university. And it was just a bunch of white people who liked anime wearing cat ears. It was disappointing because I did want to connect with something I thought that was more my heritage. Also during my undergrad, I studied philosophy. And the thing that I found most troubling or difficult about it was that there were no right answers. It was all just someone's opinion, and it was just a matter of whether or not you agree with it. And identity is one of those questions that there is no right answer. It really comes down to your subjective experience and how you feel about yourself. And so, I guess in saying that, being Nikkei, as long as you really aren't troubling anyone else with how you identify, it's your own choice.
Thank you.
Well, for me, I'm very succinct, but for me, I think that to be Nikkei, of course, sometimes there's part of, your heritage, but I think it's to enjoy and to like being immersed in the Japanese culture. So that's, for me, it's more inclusive. So that's what I think about Nikkei.
Thank you.
So to me, Nikkei is an English word, not Japanese word. So it sounds very strange to me. So I'm a Japanese Canadian Issei. I like that. I'm not Japanese, but still I maintain my nationality. I think it's the discussion of the nationality. I thought it's not so productive. So that we can maintain some citizenship of both culture, both countries. Yeah, I think it's in the future. So most of countries, I think to admit this selection of the people. So that's my conclusion.
I think in terms of Nikkei, I think it's kind of like said earlier, identity formation is so multifaceted and dynamic that it's hard to just say one thing. But I also really want to echo, I forgot who said at the beginning, about the fluidity of identity and having that fluidity but not being co-opted. Whoever said that, that was really well said. So I want to echo that as well.
So many things. I think that the future of what it means to be Nikkei is going to be decided by those in the future, and specifically young people. And we had talked about in our group that the culture and the definition of a culture depends on the people that you're surrounded by. And so if you separate yourself from other people like you, you end up taking on the cultural traits of the people that you are surrounded by. So if us as Japanese Americans specifically, we continue to spread out the way that we have been doing in the past few generations, then it's going to be anybody's guess as to what Nikkei could possibly mean. So I feel like whatever you want it to mean, if you want it to mean something specific, you have to get together with the people that you want it to mean something with. And that's why I feel like there should be more young people at COPANI, at things like this, and at gatherings like this, because they will determine that in the future. And if we don't include them in this discussion, then they're just not going to care. They're just going to be like you were saying, your children or grandchildren who are just like, I don't know, I don't care, because you never talked to me about it. So we're not gonna. I don't. So yeah, it's complicated, right? So I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. I just think of the word, the evolution of it all.
Okay.
I think we have a lot of interesting and relevant comments made. I learned a lot. But also, the question keeps coming on my mind and expanding what they said about the definition of a Nikkei. There's one side, there's white blood, the other side is including interests, subculture, things like that. So if there's no set definition, then there's going to be different interpretations, different definitions made. So then there'll be some people might be included in that, others may not be included. So I think that's a question we have to face for the situation moving forward. And like I said, maybe the youth may have a different definition of a Nikkei. So that will be the future too.
I don't have anything to add over and above what I've heard here today. And I think everybody has done a great job. Trying to explain Nikkei can't be done in one day. It'll take a lot more than that. But from what I heard here today, I think we're in pretty good shape.
I guess I piggyback on the person over there who said identity is very individual. Growing up here in the San Francisco, Japantown area, me and my friends, we rebelled against being a hyphenated American. Don't call me Japanese hyphenate American. Don't call me Chinese hyphenated American. We're not hyphenated Americans. We are Japanese American, and we feel we have a culture all our own and a history all our own. We're not Japanese from Japan, and we're not white Americans. We're Japanese Americans. And for an example, there's a Sansei band called Hiroshima, and they took very traditional Japanese instruments, but when they used them here, they tweaked them. So the koto, which is a very classical Japanese instrument, started playing jazz. The same thing with taiko. So Japanese people would say, well, we don't do that. We said, well, we do. We're Japanese American. So we have tweaked something from Japan and made it our own. That's Japanese American. So we do have a culture all our own. That's how I identify myself.
Okay. I want to say we concluded that being Nikkei is a personal discovery. We have to have, of course, some heritage, something to know about it. But ultimately, it's your choice, how you feel. Like, personally, my kids, they have different races, and, they're like 5. But sometimes they're 10, they want to be Cuban, they want to be Colombian, they want to be, it's up to them what they like. It's so personal. Identity is so personal that it's how you feel, ultimately, So it cannot be labeled. It's a word that can cover the whole, what everybody says. But it's not a specific definition. That's why we're having trouble trying to identify ourselves being Nikkei. It's however you want to look at it.
I think the Nikkei is very difficult. Yeah, by thing. Two hand or two white. One hand, one white. Two foreign. No Japan, another country. And another one is father and father Japanese. That's it, natural Nikkei. The another kind is philosopher analysis. That is good, can speak Japanese, write Japanese, to eat Japanese food. Several countries, but it's simple, that example. This is very difficult definition Nikkei, but the several companies studying this point, but now, what is Nikkei? That's very difficult. This is easy, it's very easy, that is Nikkei. But I see that. Also.
Thank you.
Just to reiterate about what you said about the future of Nikkei is our future generations, and like I'd like to have my daughter and then to immerse themselves into the Japanese culture. And I'm lucky to live in the Bay Area. We go to a lot of obons. I'm not sure if everybody we all have obons in Canada, and that's the biggest. We go to like 3 or 4 obons just to get her in the Japanese culture. And I just advocate all of us to take our next generation to Japan. This is really rare, but I think we all should go to Japan, learn, to see how the Japanese live, and when they come back, they have such a better sense about being Japanese American. I think that's the future of our next generation, is to have them go to Japan, see how they live, the culture, and it's great. So that's the best. Education is the best. So that's why I advocate everybody to do that too. So.
I grew up in a society which was mainly white, and I always felt disadvantaged. And I felt like I was a second-class citizen. And finally, I've come to terms with it, and I'm proud to be a Japanese Canadian.
Thank you.
Well, living in Mexico, it's connecting globally with other Nikkei. I was talking with Ernest today, and he said that they're working on a Nikkei kind of app, global app, so that it'll be easier for us to digitally all sort of know what's going on and stay connected and be open to all kinds of stuff.
I deal for many years with this question about the identity. But my personal conclusions are that we cannot be what we have. We have a origin that I didn't choose. I was born in a country that I didn't choose either. I have a culture from my family that I didn't choose. This is what I have. But this is not what I am. What I am is what I choose to be. So I learned here that it's a good advantage to learn from the best for my ancestors. And I became a student of the conduct and behavior of the origin of my family. But also I became very open to learn a lot from all Latin America. I traveled all the countries in Latin America, and I have contact and relationship with many people. And I also took a a lot of these good manners, behaviors of these people. And this is what I think that defines us. What we have is the origin. What we choose is, maybe we can call Nikkei, but it's what we choose. And in this community, in this COPANI, I learned, it's my first time in COPANI, I learned here that seamos mejores ciudadanos en nuestro continente. That's translated in English is let's be better citizens in our continent. I think that this is a good statement to become a community. And this is a good thing to create a network, good network because of our origins. It's the same. It's the same, and we have a lot of in common. That's why we can be together, because we have many things in common. It doesn't matter the percentage of blood, because I married some Japanese says half, others says konketsu, or others says ainoko. That ainoko is very bad. I learned that is very bad way to say that you have this combination, right? It's very destructive. That's why, but the people from the first generations, this mix says ainoko, but I learned and I changed that in Mexico, and I start saying to everybody, is konketsu, is more the mix, konketsu jin. It's not. Yeah, but half also. It's not half, because then my children will be 75%. No, it's not about the amount of percentage in my decision. It's what we choose, what we define.
I like that a lot. Being Hapa myself, and I think, stories and words are really powerful. So we're talking about a word Nikkei, and on the one hand, it's very simple. If you look at the kanji, it literally means of Japanese descent, but it's transformed, and that's why I think you might have said like it's an English word. We don't even say, I believe in my Japanese correct, we should be talking about Nikkeis, not Nikkei. Right? Nikkei is a descriptor of something. We're talking about what does it mean to be Nikkei, it's really what does it mean to be Nikkei and global community sense. So I think on one hand it's really easy to define, and on the other hand it's very difficult. And when you talk about multiple languages and multiple contexts, it becomes even more difficult. An example, Papa is a Hawaiian word, right? It doesn't mean half, it doesn't mean double, it means a part of. But it got co-opted and changed when it came to California and on the rest of the United States continent. And so now it's come to mean something where people assume it means half Asian. It has nothing to do with Asians. It's a Hawaiian word. But it's changed over time and it means different things, different people. And I feel Nikkei to a certain extent is arguing cut. You don't have the jin anymore, which means a person. And now you're changing it to something and trying to make it both Portuguese, Spanish, English, and Japanese. And it may not fit. So I think the question here is Nikkei itself the appropriate term we should be talking about on one hand? So I think there's a lot of good from it because we have to have a word, because we have to communicate, and we need to be able to manage what we control, right? Like we choose to be something, or we come from something. So whatever that word ends up being, I think it's a powerful thing. I'm just not sure if Nikkei is the right word. So,
wow, that's a great thing to put out there. So much pressure, be last person.
Something really profound. Remember.
Well, the only thing that I really had to say was that I think sometimes it can be very isolating to be Nikkei. And so having opportunities like this where, when you're isolated, it's hard to really set your roots down deep and then be able to grow. And so having opportunities like this where we are able to ground ourselves and really grab onto our roots, watching movies, like the movies that we saw yesterday, having opportunities to talk, having opportunities to communicate with all these different people, I think really helps to bloom and to grow. And so I'm just really happy you all are here and that we can share this together.
What a great note to end on. Positive, very enthusiastic. So we have completely run out of time. We've gone over time. But thank you so much for coming and participating in this workshop. I enjoyed hearing from all of you, and I hope everyone can take something away from today. There's a lot of really thought-provoking ideas that came out, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. But I hope to see you all again sometime, someplace. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thanks.